Remember this? Is it like that with chess? Are you like, remember this opening, remember that move, and then that one move? Or do you just think about, this is the opening I'm going to play?
I think in an ideal world, you would already have it all mapped out.
Yeah.
You'd planned it far in advance, just like with exams. But usually chess players, they stress out about it until the last moment. At least I do. And meanwhile, the game has kicked off. It's the Spanish opening, the Roy Lopez. The moves coming very, very fast. And we've seen this plenty of times from Magnus Carlsen before, including during the World Championship match. And during the World Championship match, he was usually bringing the black rook across one square in this position. This is what and there we go, the rook does just sidestep any potential pressure on the A-line. And this is what we call the anti-Marshall. It's avoiding the Marshall Gambit, named after the American player Frank Marshall. And this position arose plenty of times in that famous clash between Nepomniachtchi and Carlsen. Giri must have done his homework here. Magnus knows pretty much everything there is to know about this position.
It's very interesting because Magnus was relying on this to retain the World Championship, and Anish has had all the time in the world to try and find something from the white perspective, knowing that he must win this game. So it really is a battle of preparation. Yeah. Can he break Magnus down? I mean, I thought after the World Championships, the consensus was generally that black's a little bit worse in these positions, but you can't beat Magnus in them. That's basically what I gathered, you know, that Magnus is kind of like, you know, he's done his work and he knows that these positions are just about manageable. But we will see.
Yeah. And what's exciting about Anish's team is that they're quite young and they're always providing fresh ideas. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they've taken from the World Championship match and how they're going to pose Magnus some problems. And this is why Magnus actually varies from his move that he played in the World Championship. There, he actually picked up his H-pawn, moved it one square. Now he's developing his light square bishop.
Yep, and this is why Magnus likes these positions so much. It's exactly as you said, Simon. Black has a small disadvantage and will do for the next 10, 15 moves, but you're super flexible, you're super solid, you have options on every turn in terms of varying your move order, and it's extremely hard for white to find a knockout blow, something direct. And if there's nothing direct, then slowly that advantage might fizzle out from the white side. So I'm personally a bit surprised that Anish has gone for this in a situation where he really does want to win. It just feels like you're playing on your opponent's home turf. Yes, objectively, according to a computer, as we see the evaluation bar, you might have an advantage. It might say plus 0.5. It might even say +1. But in terms of practical play, your opponent is super solid. Your opponent knows all the defensive plans, and it's going to be hard to break through later. So we will see. But meanwhile, early days in this opening battle.
Oof. I feel the nerves for Anish, Giri, and for many of these players who are fighting to qualify for the knockout. And obviously, everyone's dependent on all the other games. I'm not even sure if they can see the other games while they're playing in online chess.
I think they're allowed in these tournaments to go and check if they want, but it does take a while. It does take a while to do that. Normally, when I've played in these types of tournaments, you're allowed to have one browser open, just your game, nothing else. But I think the players, they are allowed other windows just to check the rival games. That's the only way they know how to make decisions, whether to take a draw, whether to press on for a win.
Yeah.
But usually the players, they don't do that. They just focus on their own game.
Yeah. The time control, of course, is usually they won't have time anyways when it's getting into those critical moments. All right. A few moves here.
Yep, a couple of moves, and again, but it's very logical plans from both sides. White bringing the knight out, and black occupying a square with his knight that cannot, at least temporarily, get kicked away. And white's knight retreating out the way in order to create a square for a white pawn to kick back the black knight from his half of the board. This is still pretty standard stuff, but Magnus at least gaining some space in the centre, some more influence by the black pawns. And yeah, this combo of the two white knights right now, perfectly defensive pieces, but they can also leap forward later on to attack. And yeah, from my experience here, I'm never comfortable with the black side. But then again, with white, sometimes the thing is, what do you do next? When do you push in the centre? When do you attack the black king? There's so many questions. And OK, Magnus, he's the expert. Let's trust him for now. And the black queen just sidestepping. Anish, it looks like he has done his homework very well, however, continuing the pace, just bringing his bishop out there. Maybe eyeing up that black knight. What do you think, guys? If you get a chance with white, will you take it?
Well,
OK, it's run away.
The question has been answered for us. Yeah, retreating the knight. OK, limiting white's options.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like this is fairly standard stuff, as you mentioned. White wants to get this chance to attack, I guess, on the king side, and maybe White has an extra pawn break generally, with the idea of pushing the c pawn and then pushing in the centre. And it kind of seems in these positions, even though they're equal, it's the side with the more possibilities, which has the easier game and maybe the better chances here. But I would have thought Magnus would be just comfortable because, you know, he had a World Championships defending this kind of structure. So, and he knows Anish needs to win, so he doesn't need to push it too much.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Anish does bring his bishop out, maybe trying to eliminate a key defender of the black king. The reason White has maybe a tiny advantage in these types of positions is because this bishop is usually so strong. We often call it the Spanish bishop because in this opening, this is the key piece. If black can trade it off or kick it back, then black's normally doing OK. But right now, it sits on a great diagonal against the black king. And for example, if black is a bit too careless and just makes a kind of nothing move, a move that doesn't improve his position, you could well see a trade on this square, and suddenly the white knights might jump forward towards the black king. Also, there's a nice hole in the centre of the board, a nice outpost potentially for white's knights later in the game. Meanwhile, Magnus forcing the white bishop, to commit. He's pushed a pawn forward, and if we catch up with the current position, yeah, he's attacking the dark squared bishop now. To take or not to take, that is the question. If you take, yes, you gain access to this square, but at least short term, maybe black is OK, no direct threats. But if you step back, that would allow the possibility, at least, of black pushing forward and trapping the white bishop on the edge of the board. This is always a dilemma. This is one of the things I still struggle with. I think I've struggled with since I was 5 years old. When do you push this pawn forward and trap the bishop? Because it does allow potential sacrifices.
It's very like the World Championships. There was a moment when Jan, I think Jan was with the black pieces even, and they had this idea where Magnus could have done the same thing and sacrificed the piece. But I kind of, I like the way Anish is playing, but with this last knight manoeuvre, trying to bring it into that massive square in the middle of the board, and it's finding those weakened squares manoeuvring around. But this would work against me, but these things rarely work against someone like Magnus Carlsen. You can't slow manoeuvre Magnus in these kind of positions from experience. I mean, we'll see.
Just wondering now, because the knight has kind of retreated, and so I'm looking at this position, I'm going, ooh, you step backwards, I go forwards. I mean, is there any way that black could start advancing any of his pawns? Maybe even the moves that I'm thinking about is maybe even pushing the c5 pawn. It might be a bit too creative for my own good. And then the whole idea is once pawn takes pawn, then you go knight to attack the bishop.
Okay, wow, interesting. So hitting this bishop and now hitting this pawn as well. And if white continues and takes this black pawn, white might be a pawn up temporarily, but after this trade, then we see these two doubled pawns. It's the theme of today. Two doubled weak pawns, and black does have the bishop pair as well to target these pawns later. Really interesting there, Jovanka. So this is definitely on Magnus's radar. Personally, I think he's not going to touch these pawns. I think he'll be reluctant to do that just because this pawn formation, which we actually see in the English opening, is kind of known as the Botvinnik setup. Magnus is the big expert here. He loves this pawn structure from the Sicilian defense as well. He gets it very regularly there. But also in this opening, the Spanish, we've seen him time and time again with the black pieces. Just keep this pawn structure, maybe plug this hole by using a knight later on, just retreating that, maybe even at the right moment offering a trade of bishops. And he loves to organise this pawn push later on, f5. So it might involve a slow plan, pushing this pawn forward, dropping back the bishop, maybe getting the king out the way. But Magnus, I think, long-term would love to just keep the tension and then later push this pawn forward. Another game springs to mind from last season of the tour when Magnus beat Levon Aronian in an almost identical pawn structure. So this move, it might well be good, but it feels to me as if it's just not Magnus's usual plan. So maybe he'll buck the trend here and try something different, but if not, then he might just maintain the tension and continue manoeuvring. A move such as this one is what I expect, at least.
And I think Ty's calculations are final now for round 15. This is the situation. So 11 players are fighting for those 8 spots in the quarterfinals. 3 players are 100% safe: Nepomniachtchi, Carlsen and Artemiev. And 92 almost 93% chance for Erik Hansen to qualify. But for then Anish Giri, 28.2% chance. And Ty did tell us that it is a must-win situation for Anish in this game. And can we see that by his play, that he's just taking risks?
No big risks. No big risks yet.
Should he take bigger risks, basically?
I think the opening choice was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, as we say, Magnus Carlsen had this in the World Championships. Anish is just playing his normal kind of style. But can you beat Magnus on a good day in this kind of structure? I don't see it happening. I'm saying that this last move, playing the knight into the centre of the board, is something I certainly did not expect Magnus to play. But it makes some sense, because if the knight is captured, you stop the manoeuvre that White was banking on playing. So you take away the knight square on e3, and maybe we can just sort of show that on the board. So I guess that's why Magnus has taken the opportunity to play a little bit of activity here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this would be a strategic mistake actually to capture in the centre now, because yes, Black gets doubled pawns, but Black also gets access to a semi-open file. This guy is actually a backward pawn on the c2 square, but also, as Simon mentions, more importantly, not just this, but the White Knight lacks a way to manoeuvre into the centre. So I'm expecting to see maybe just the White Bishop move. This bishop is under fire after all, and as Jovanka showed, OK, he does take. Ooh. Wow. I was going to say maybe just plant it in the centre of the board, later use your knight to back it up. But he does capture on the d4 square. And
surprising moves all round for me.
Whoa.
Because taking with the e-pawn, I mean, like, really? I mean, again,
you normally capture towards the centre, right?
And David said you've got the open c-file where the queen is. Why are you taking this way around? It's this is his idea, I guess. He's going c4, but really did not expect any of this.
Yeah, he wants to use all these pawns and just launch them forward to destabilise White, but White got the bishop out of the way before it got trapped.
I never like taking with the e-pawn as Black personally, because it always gives White the chance to push the f-pawn at some stage. And those two pawns, well, I know them very well because a chessball course I did recently, the British Grand Prix. This is the structure of the Dutch. These two pawns work so well together, and maybe even the White Knight can come out g3 to h5, and I don't know. I don't know if I like this from Black.
Yeah, it feels like Magnus is trying to be ambitious as well, and maybe that will backfire. Meanwhile, I'm surprised by every single move in this game. This one as well, a bit loose. The general rule is don't touch pawns on the side where you're weaker. And here, this is where Black is trying to push. Black is the one initiating the play. So for White to push his pawn forward as well, very, very surprising. I guess he just wants to clarify the situation with these two Black pawns. And most likely Magnus will decide to push. And we will see a situation where any endgame might just be winning for Black, because OK, he doesn't do this. I was going to say this pawn is a potential target later on. But then again, Black cannot access this open file because White's bishop stops the rook using it. So, OK, therefore, Magnus decides not to clarify the tension and he wants to trade the bishops off. We might well see a situation after a trade like this, knight against bishop, but with a really weird pawn structure.
It seems like they're playing quite quick, and I feel that maybe it's the nerves we talked about, that, there's been this drama going on recently. It's obviously been very stressful on Anish and probably on Magnus as well. And, when you're more nervous, you tend to play quicker. And it just feels like they're making these big decisions very quickly, even at the level they're at, making these decisions. I don't know, it seems a bit strange making them at this speed.
And kind of the sin that I was thinking about, 7 deadly sins that David did some little promo videos for. Well, it kind of here, it feels like both sides are kind of being quite egoistic. They're just thinking about what they want, and they're kind of allowing emotions as well as nervousness. They both want to win. They both want to show that they're better. And so I don't know, because otherwise, why make those moves so quickly? They're important decisions.
Maybe Magnus just wants to have some rest.
It's
very possible. I mean, he really does seem a bit tired today, and he's qualified, so it might just be like, right, I just want to rest, get ready for the next day. But there's a decision to be made here, right, from White. I mean, can White grab this pawn? Is that completely crazy? No, it probably is, because you can't open up d3, but I don't know, maybe this b3 move from Anish was just a waste of time, it seems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question though, Simon. White can well grab a pawn, and I kind of just ruled it out very quickly, but the more I look at it, the more I think maybe it's possible. White could just grab this pawn now, it would at least justify his last move, right? It would at least be consistent. And after a trade here and another capture, white does have these two ugly pawns. And as you mentioned, this d3 move, pushing the black pawn forward, at some point might well become relevant, just opening up this bishop to attack a rook in the corner. But then again, the rook will just move at some point. And I'm not sure black has full compensation here. So maybe black will keep this one in reserve, maybe activate his rook, bring it in at some point, maybe swing this rook across. And Magnus, I guess he's just not being too materialistic. He's just hoping that the position will open up for the bishops. And OK, meanwhile, we didn't see that happen. We do see a trade instead. So a real central pawn mass here for black. It's a bit of a weird structure. But then again, this knight, at least for now, is a passive piece.
Yeah. I mean, another idea he did, well, it's too late now, but I was thinking if Magnus was white, what would Magnus do? And I'm sure Magnus maybe even considering that last position, b takes, knight d2. Because one thing I noticed is Magnus is so good at finding squares for his knights. And you're playing with this knight against the dark square bishop. That also seemed a very promising positional way to play, but maybe not enough to win. And that's what Anish is thinking. Maybe Anish is thinking, right, I need to take that bishop like I did in the game because I need to create more imbalance. But you shouldn't be playing this opening if you need to create a lot of imbalance, is the other argument about that.
Yeah.
Exactly. So actually he goes for a similar idea to yours, but slightly less forcing at least. He's still putting some pressure on this pawn. Indirectly, he wants to capture it with his own pawns first. But now if black blocks it up, which I think probably Magnus is reluctant to do, then the white knight will re-centralize itself. And this bishop is just a bad piece, staring at its own pawns. It's completely blocked, no future for that piece. So I think Magnus will be reluctant, definitely, to push this pawn forward. There's arguments, though, to be made for opening up one file at least, or possibly even push a pawn in the centre. This is very risky. I'm not sure black's entirely ready for this, but, I mean, it just looks nice, right? Having as many pawns as possible, this pawn mass in the middle of the board. And the reason I say it's risky is because white's queen could come out, maybe attacking the base of the pawn chain. That would be a check. And black's pawns are a bit loose. I'm not sure. Magnus will go for this.
Blocked it down.
He does block it down. Wow.
This is a little bit surprising,
Surprises
right?
on every turn, yeah.
Putting your pawns on the same colour square as your bishop is not supposed to be a good idea because your bishop gets more blocked in. But he does get a load of space over there. So I guess it's one exchange for another, but still a bit surprising there.
Yeah, for me, it was quite natural, I have to say. I mean, I was banking on the fact that the bad bishop is a good defensive bishop and, maybe there's some action along the open line. And also remember, Magnus just needs a draw. And why not simplify the position a little bit? And, OK, here we go.
Wow.
Bad
Magnus
bishop
really,
extraordinaire.
Yeah, Magnus really doesn't care about his bishop.
He's just got to go b4 and he's done the perfect pattern, hasn't he? He's like, everything on the dark squares there.
Look at this. I mean, he's really lucky white doesn't have a light squared bishop. Yeah. Otherwise, this would be disaster.
I mean, if white can ever get his knight in the game somehow, white should probably win this. But is there any way white can ever get the knight in? I mean, you put the knight in the centre of the board here, game over. But maybe you just can't manoeuvre the knight. I mean, you have to create some weaknesses somewhere. F5 maybe is a square, but I don't know. It seems like only white is the one who might has chances here, I should say.
Yeah. I mean, black's avenue of attack will be this file if he can somehow sneak his rook in later, but white won't abandon that anytime soon. And another plan for white could just be an endgame. For example, you could move your rook across, and if black just, for example, waits or locks it down, then you could bring your queen back and at some point aim to trade off this set of rooks. For example, like this, take, and then offer another trade. If you can get all the rooks off, you'll be very happy with white, but maybe the problem is that black will just park a rook on a square where you don't really want to capture it because this would just allow a very powerful passed pawn. So it's really, really interesting strategically. It's not clear what either side's plans are or what they want to achieve long term, but either way, still a lot of life left.
Yeah.
And Anish may be a bit nervous, dropping lower on the clock than Magnus, and in the end, just playing an innocent pawn move. OK, Magnus going for a similar idea to the one I mentioned. He wants to take over on this A file before white does.
Yeah, so maybe white plays h4, h5, knight g4, f4. Sorry, there's a lot of moves there. But you try to do something on the king side from the white perspective, and you try to use the light squares on the king side because black can't control the light squares on the king side because everything's on dark squares. And one thing to bear in mind, if you put all your pawns on one colour square, and black's done that. He's put all of his pawns on dark squares. It naturally makes the opposite colour squares weak, the light squares, so you can just aim to target them, and that's what he's going for. So he's going for this pawn push and going to try to put those... well, look, I did beat Magnus when he's 10 years old. So, I know how to beat the kid.
Oh, yeah.
Unlike some of us.
Yeah, that was impressive.
You've also sprinkled your magic dust on all the players. Every game today, we've seen the move H4 at some point.
I know, yeah, it's coming.
On that subject of H4, Houston's Aft actually tweeted us a super cool poem about Harry. And you can see on the board there's been a rook exchange. And it goes, there was a small pawn once named Harry who had the whole white team to carry. He ran down his line and felt mighty fine when he turned queen and looked like a fairy.
That's pretty good.
Beautiful.
Nice work.
It is nice work, yeah.
Wow, you should write that out and hang it on your wall, Simon.
Yeah, definitely. The weirdest idea I had actually was I wanted to send Harry to space, and I saw you could get these like balloons that go into the stratosphere.
Yeah.
And I wanted to attach a camera to a balloon. I wanted to get a little Harry, just send him up into space. Maybe one day crowdfund it. It'd be quite good footage for the show.
Yeah,
could be.
A lone Harry would just be a pawn. So.
It would be a little Harry venturing into space. First Harry into space.
You know you can buy stars, right? You can buy.
You can buy stars. It's kind of cheating, though, isn't it?
Oh, but whoa, we have a result, you guys. Andrei Esipenko has won the game against Levon Aronian, and that must mean that Esipenko is qualified. I think quite certain, but does it also mean that Levon Aronian is out?
Yeah.
Maybe not 100% sure, but it's not looking good then for Levon. Wow.
Wow, and only 20 moves. Levon making a massive blunder early in the game with white. No. You rarely see that, but fair play to Esipenko. He spotted a mistake. It wasn't obvious, and he pounced to win that game. So, meanwhile, in this one, still manoeuvring around. Black has conquered this A file with the black rook, with the black queen, but what to do with it? That is the big question. White's knight, meanwhile, very, very stuck.
I have an idea of what to do with the A line, but it doesn't involve the queen or the rook. It involves the king. I think the king can snake his way and sit all the way up onto the B5 square, where it's safe as houses.
B4 square.
B4 square, sorry.
Probably a nice idea, that. So.
Definitely in an endgame if the rooks and queens come off.
Here it comes. I can't believe if he gets the king all the way to that dark square, which is B4, that would be phenomenal. And actually, pretty good idea, right? Because you can go. All the endings are probably going to be quite nice. And I mean, what Magnus has done here. I mean, we mentioned Anish has this control on the king side, but open files are so important, and Magnus controls that open file. OK, he's got to get the queens
I reckon
off.
the queens are going to try to come off, and then, once the coast is clear,
off you
the
go.
king is running.
All right, well, the bar jumps up a little bit for Anish. With one game finished, I just want to take a quick look at the live table. Esipenko winning that game, gaining 3 points. I think we can get the live table up to see the situation right now. So, with all the other games still going on, Esipenko in second place. And where is Levon? 7th place. But then Anish Giri can overtake him. Ding Liren can go past him. It's not looking good for Levon Aronian. All right.
And also, I'm very interested in Eric Hansen, of course, because I think he only needs to get a draw, but I might be wrong. We need our stats guy, but if he wins, he certainly goes through. So, which would be great for his team of streamers online. I mean, that'd be amazing. I think he only had 5% chance, didn't he, to qualify at
when
the
he
start.
started?
So that'd be tremendous result for him.
Incredible performance. Yeah. All right, a bunch of moves happening here. Do you see chances for Anish to win this?
Definitely some chances. I'm very surprised, I must admit, by this king march. Yes, it's the artistic way to do it, but Black's king is not entirely safe on this side of the board. And it does feel like White's queen is going to cause a lot of annoyance over the next few turns. Unless Black can get the queens off, I think Anish might be the one having the fun. And look what White's done. He's put his pawn on B4 before the Black king can get there. And, it just feels a bit scary now from the Black side. If the White knight can somehow join the action, it's still not easy to do that, but Simon maybe mapped one path. The White knight at some point might drop back, and to the h2 square, jump to g4.
I mean, I think you have to look at pawn breaks, don't you? And at some point, maybe this knight coming back and pushing the f-pawn, it just seems like a very natural way to play on the king side. And now that black doesn't control that a file anymore, now that black's king can always be checked, as it has happened here, it seems like there's, even whatever the computer says, there's quite a lot of danger for Magnus in this position, because he has to be very careful.
Yeah. Will we see a repetition of the position? Black is offering the queen trade. Anish has to decide now. If you take the queens off, that will only favour black. And that is because this pawn is on a dark square. Black might pick it off later in the game. So Anish cannot swap queens. He wants to keep the queens on. But if he retreats with a check, this is blocked. If he goes forward with a check, this is blocked. And that would repeat the position. Let's go back to the players. If he wants to win, OK, he does keep the queens on the board.
Right,
no
nice.
queen trade.
And now he's controlling some more squares on the king side. This maybe important square g4 that the knight can try to get into to pressurise black's king side. I mean, I think this is very uncomfortable for black, this position, and I don't think the computer maybe gives it enough justice how tricky it is to defend from black's point of view. Anish must be happy here, surely, in the position.
I just don't understand this king manoeuvre. Why is the king not back where it started? Why did the queen not just put itself on light squares earlier, stopping white's queen getting in? Now white's queen is in. It's all sorts of trouble for black. And, OK, he's still solid for now. Everything's protected. This rook retreat just over-guarding this central pawn. But it's looking good for Anish if he can somehow enact one of these two plans, bringing the knight back, leaping it forward, or maybe even pushing this pawn now to open up some lines.
But you have to be careful, David, because Magnus's move looks like it was just a retreating move, but it did contain a threat, which is basically to step the queen back and offer a trade, and just try to pester Anish with that offer of queen trade.
OK, but then there would just be a check and... Oh, whoops, not that check. This check. And white's queen could escape the trade. So, OK, he goes for the second plan, the safer plan. I don't think you need to rush with this move. You want to prepare it first. He drops his knight back.
It's just torture for black. It's absolute torture, because you can see black is just losing a move, white improves, losing a move, white improves. This just seems like incredibly tough, no? I mean, when the knight gets this square it's heading for, white can push at the right moment. I just hate to be black in this position.
Yeah, fully agreed. And Magnus continuing this dance with the queens, trying and hoping, praying that they come off the board. But Anish will try and keep them on if he can. And he would love to keep the queen on this diagonal, if possible, in order to stop the black rook coming back down and threatening some pawns.
Do you agree with the bar saying 1.4 advantage? Quite a big advantage for Anish.
I mean, here in this type of position, I think we would just discuss Grandmasters. We would just say it's easier to play with white. White is the one who can take the draw at any moment if he wants. Black is the one struggling and defending. I'm not sure that will translate into a kind of concrete physical advantage in terms of winning material or winning a pawn, being +1 up, but it's definitely easier to play with white. OK, but repeating the position, this is the second time we've seen this position. OK, Anish needs to find a different square for the white queen. If he takes the draw and then gets eliminated, I think he will live to regret it. So he should keep the queens on, at least play on a bit longer.
I don't think he will take the draw. I think we're safe there. I think he will... Oh,
has he taken a draw?
Well,
that is
I'll
crazy.
eat my words.
Really?
What?
Wow.
OK, Magnus, meanwhile, smiling. Anish bailing out with the draw. He could have kept the game going another 20, 30 moves and then gone for the same draw.
Yeah.
I can't believe that. You can just keep the queen going. Black's